It's mid-June here in Minnesota, and I've just finished planting not that long ago. Today we're going to do a quick early season garden tour, some highlights of the planting season, and we're going to talk about what I start assessing for this early for my tomato breeding projects. First, some planting highlights. I've got my ear protection on because I'm pounding in some T-posts. There's my post pounder. You can see all of the pink flags are marking where the tomato plants will be planted. I'm pounding in a T-post about every 6 tomato plants. I have both 6-foot and 8-foot steel T-posts. Although it's easier to pound in the 6-footers, I prefer the 8-footers for my tomatoes. While transplanting my tomato plants from the greenhouse, Lucy the cat is always welcomed company. Take note of how I am planting these tall tomato plants. I am pruning off several of the lower lateral branches and burying the plant deep into the soil. Digging 300 holes was like doing 300 squats. Next, I am planting some shelling peas. I am planting double rows 30 inches apart. I'm using a string line to keep my rows reasonably straight. I'm not using a tape measure like I do for my tomatoes. I'm just eyeballing it about 1 inch per seed. I'm a bit late on this planting, as peas should really be planted earlier, and I waited until all of my transplants were out of the greenhouse before I planted these peas. I'm really excited to try shelling peas this year. Usually I grow a bush bean, and I'm a little tired of the canned green beans. I would really like some canned peas this year. If the pea crop is indeed successful, I will invest in a pea sheller. Lucy is such a loyal cat. I selected the lowest and wettest spot in my garden for the celery transplants. This transplant is nice and big, but most of them were smaller than this as I started them in plug trays. Next year I will grow all of them in the Bootstrap Farmer air pruning trays. This year I planted them in a grid about 9 to 10 inch spacing. It's time to gas up the big tiller. I have an old Craftsman that I got from Sears years ago. Does anybody else miss the Sears store? 'Cause I sure do. I use both a big tiller and a mini tiller so I can minimize the weeding on my hands and knees. As for the squash, I can only run my tiller so close to it. That means I have to hand weed the rest. I'm patiently waiting for some more of the squash seeds to germinate yet, so I have to be very delicate with my weeding here. I did 3 sowings of squash seed, and the newly germinated seedlings are quite difficult to spot in all of that grass. As far as weeding my pepper plants, Bentley the cat is not having it. He wants all the attention from me. Luckily, I can multitask. I can just keep petting him while I weed at the same time. I run my mini tiller up and down the rows of pepper plants. However, it is necessary to manually weed around the base of the plants. It's funny how the grass grows 5 times faster than the actual plant. Let's start on the east side of my farm with some of my raised garden beds. So this garden bed is ready to be harvested today, actually. What I have on the edge here is some kale. This is blue Scotch curled kale. You'll hear some of my sheep baaing in the background. And then these are Pink Beauty radishes, which I will be harvesting today. I got a little behind here. I planted on May 15th. We're into mid-June now, so it's been 30 days. They're definitely ready to go. Some of them are even starting to flower. And to the side of that here, I have some sugar snap peas. And it looks like I'm going to be doing my first harvest of those as well today. Moving over to the next raised bed. Here I have some cucumbers. The variety of cucumber that I've been growing for several years is called Japanese Climbing. And this is a variety that I've been selecting for and seed saving for several years. So it's definitely acclimated to my region and my soil type. I do have a few bell peppers here. This variety is called Lesya, L-E-S-Y-A. And I purchased this variety from Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds. I did use this in my pepper cross that I made last year. So these are all the same variety. I want to keep them isolated and together. I did leave a few volunteer ground cherries in the midst there. That's why it looks a little weedy. Moving over to the next raised garden bed. Here I am trying a shelling pea called Wando. This is something new I'm trying this year, and I'm trying these peas in both raised beds and in the big garden in the ground. So this particular batch is a nice size right now. This was planted on May 15th. The other ones were planted quite a bit later. Very anxious to try this year. And moving over to this raised bed, I am trying some different lettuces. I'm experimenting 2 different ways of growing the lettuces. So this is Lola Rosa, a red loose leaf lettuce. And I can see that this planting method is turning out better for me versus doing rows. I have some different types of romaine lettuces here in rows. And here I am growing some cilantro. This is a dwarf lemon cilantro that I'm trying this year. Again, I got that from Baker Creek. In the past, I've grown slow bolt cilantro. A little slow to germinate. Cilantro does prefer cooler temperatures for germination. And we had a really unusually hot spring around Memorial Day weekend. It's quite tricky to get that cilantro to time out where it's ripe and ready to go when I have my peppers and tomatoes to make salsa. I like to use it for salsa. For basil this year, I'm growing my favorite, which is the lettuce leaf basil. The leaves on this variety get really huge and are very much like a leaf of lettuce. I really like the flavor and the size. And these 4 peppers here are actually F1 hybrids. So this is a cross that I did last year. So I'm really curious to see how these turn out. I have them isolated. I only had 4 seeds from the cross. So I hand pollinated the cross. I had literally 4 seeds from that cross, and fortunately all 4 germinated. And lastly, on the edge here, oh, you can see I've got a volunteer slow bolt cilantro. I'll just keep that there. Goes good in my rice and bean bowls. And here I have some Mexican sour gherkins. So these Mexican sour gherkins were planted the earliest on May 15th. So they are the largest in size right now. And actually I'm a little behind. I need to get my fence over here. They will vine and crawl up the fence. So I need to get that installed this weekend here. But these are looking great. Now let's move over to the side here. I have some currant bushes. Now I bought a few of these online. Gosh, I can't even remember how many years ago it's been. I want to say maybe 5 years or so. They've been really slow to grow. And it looks like this year is the first year that they're actually going to have some fruit on them. So I'm pretty excited. It's been a long time waiting. They have survived the winters here sufficiently. It's just I've noticed that they've been very slow to grow and mature. So I have some black currants. Looks like I have 3 of the black ones here, and then I also have a red currant. Just something I wanted to try. I have to be patient on waiting for these. Let's move on to the next section of raised beds on my north part of the farm. This raised bed on the north is again the Wando shelling pea that I'm trying. The germination was pretty high on this one. I think because it's more shaded and it has some shade from a Liberty apple tree. The soil here is also less amended with manure and it's more of a heavy clay. So let's go and check out some other raised garden beds. In the north section of my garden, I have some chives as well as some radishes. I grew about 9 different radishes this year, so I'll be sure to showcase all of them for you. The rest of this one here is more of the Wando shelling pea. You can tell I really want to have a lot of peas this year. Behind me, I also have some additional shelling peas. Just needs to be weeded right now. And then back here, I have some additional radishes. So mostly radishes and shelling peas back here. And this one was planted the latest. And so the germination is a little bit spottier here. I just plopped down a few more seeds yesterday in these bare spots. And what these are here are just some volunteer ground cherries. Last year I grew ground cherries in this bed, so it's pretty typical to get some volunteers there, and I think I'll keep a few of them. On the west side of my garden, I did buy some fruiting shrubs this year, which I'm really excited about. I bought some aronia berries and elderberries. So here I have 10 aronia berries, which is this here. I bought them as a dormant whip, and they leafed out this spring, and so far they're looking pretty good. So I have a row of 10 of them all planted along here. The orange flags are here so that I know where they're located so I don't accidentally mow them off with the lawnmower. And this variety, all 10 of these are the Viking aronia berry. Next I have 4 elderberries. You can see one here. This was the smallest one. I wasn't sure if it was going to make it, but it did leaf out. One here and 2 larger ones here. The variety of elderberry that I purchased were 2 of them. I got Ranch and Bob Gordon. I'm excited about the Ranch. It's supposed to be really good for the Midwest. And this one is, I believe, the Ranch right here. And the Bob Gordon. So I'm very anxious in a few years, hopefully, to have some elderberries. On the north side of my garden, I'm growing squash. I have 2 varieties of C. maxima, which I intend to do a cross on this year. And I'm growing a summer squash, the Black Beauty zucchini, which I've been growing for years. Lucy, my cat, loves hanging out in the garden with me. So I did squash hills about 6 feet apart. The flags are showing where they germinated, so I knew where to not till them up by accident. We are having a little bit of problem with cucumber beetles this year, hence some of the holes that you see in the foliage, such as here. But so far it's not enough to seemingly affect the growth. This first row here that you see in the ground is actually radishes. This radish seed is about 16 years old. It's some old Cincinnati market seed. I just wanted to use it up because it is so old. And shockingly, you can see it actually had pretty decent germination. Now the radishes will be mature in about 30 days, so they'll be out of the way for the squash. By the time this squash starts vining out, and keep in mind that these vines can reach about 30 feet. So the radishes will be long gone and out of here by the time these vines start sprawling. To the right here, we have the Wando shelling pea again. So I did several rows of these in this garden. These were planted quite a bit later. I put all of my greenhouse transplants out here first, and then I wanted to see how much leftover room I had, and then I planted these. So compared to that first raised bed, which was planted on May 15th, these were planted approximately Memorial Day or possibly even after that into early June. So quite a bit later. They didn't really like the high heat we had in the end of May, but even so, the germination, I would say, is fair. Very anxious to try some shelling peas this year, so I hope it works out. These 3 rows of tomatoes were my second tomatoes, I would call them. They were the smaller plants from the greenhouse, and they were planted quite a bit later than my first primary batch. This row of fencing here is some more of the Japanese climbing cucumber. So I like to do succession planting for cucumbers, since they do tend to die out pretty rapidly, and I'd like to have cucumbers throughout the entire summer season. So that first batch on the raised bed was May 15th. This one was more like late May to early June. Another reason I like to plant 2 plantings of cucumbers is because I do my own selection and seed saving of the cucumbers. So I will let some get very mature for seed saving, which will reduce the energy that it uses for production. So you want to plant more than you intend to eat if you're going to do seed saving. Moving on to the side here, this is my second year growing celery. So last year I grew a Chinese pink celery that I had gotten from Baker Creek. This year I'm doing two different varieties. Utah Tall Improved, which I believe I purchased from, I can't think of the name right now, I'll put it in the video description. And then a dwarf celery as well. So the flags are dividing the two different varieties. So I'm not super experienced with celery. Like I said, this is only my second year growing it, but I really did like having it last year since I use it in my homemade barbecue sauce recipe. And to the side here, I did have a few more of that lettuce leaf basil. So I had a few of the lettuce leaf basil up in that first raised garden bed, and then I have a few in the garden here as well. I think they both look pretty healthy. I'm not really noticing a difference right now in the raised bed versus in the ground. They look pretty good. Those were started in the greenhouse. Again, just a really nice basil variety that I like. This section here is about 200 bell peppers. Now this variety is sweet chocolate. This is a variety that I really like here for a northern grower. They're early and they do really well for me. I did a cross with this last year and Lesia, which you saw those F1s I was growing out previously. Another thing I want to point out is I am trying some cages this year. So I am using some tomato cages. I say that loosely because they're really more suitable for pepper cages. We have a very windy site out here. It's windy 99% of the time. I live by a lot of lakes here in Minnesota. Also, my cats like to come in the garden, and a lot of times they will roll on top of my plants and break them or smother them. So last year what I ended up doing was I took small fence posts and some baler's twine, and I tied the plants to a single post to support them that way. We did have some pretty nasty thunderstorms and high winds that snapped some of my plants over last year. And while that did work, we're going to try these cages this year. It is a little more supportive than just tying it to a single stake, and it protects them from my cats. Here on the south side of my garden, I snuck in a single row of bush beans here, right alongside the tomatoes, just on the edge here. Again, I had some old seeds that I wanted to use up. Now this variety of bean is called Empress. I originally purchased them from Seed Savers Exchange. And since then, I have been saving seeds of it myself. So I have, like I said, this single row going all along the edge here. I mainly want to be able to fit my tiller through here, so I just did a single row here. Once you get to this nice tall fencing here with the chicken wire fencing, now I have another planting of Mexican sour gherkins. And these were planted quite a bit later, which is why they're much smaller than the ones in the raised garden bed, but still looking great. You can see that I had excellent germination. I sow my seeds very thickly. And I also planted seeds on both sides of the fence. As the season progresses, they will vine up this chicken wire fencing and, climb all the way up to the top. Our season is pretty short here in Minnesota. I'm more zone 4, I would say borderline zone 3 actually here. So we get a frost pretty early, which will kill the Mexican sour gherkins. If you had a longer growing season, they could easily surpass the height of this fence and continue onward. A really fun plant. They're basically like a little miniature cucumber, and I'll be making a video of that just solely on that crop. Here onto the side, I snuck in some mint. Now normally I grow mint when I do choose to grow it in the raised garden beds. Mint can be pretty invasive, so you typically want to contain it in some way. However, our season is so short here, and although it's supposed to survive, I think down to zone 4, I have found that it does not for me. it does not survive the winters. So our winters will kill it off, and I do have to plant it and treat it like an annual. I've grown many different mints. I've actually heard that there's about 600 mint varieties, which is just fascinating to me. I'd love to get my hands on that and try it. I've grown just a handful of them myself. This one is the chocolate mint. Now the chocolate mint performs the best for my region. It's also the easiest to dehydrate this, to dry it down for tea. So it performs really well, fast growing, easy to dehydrate for tea. And I like the flavor of the chocolate mint. It is one of my favorites. This is pineapple mint. This one I have not grown yet, so this one is new to me this year. And my all-time favorite mint is actually spearmint. So I definitely have to grow the spearmint. The spearmint, it does have a thicker leaf, and so I find it takes a lot longer to dry it down, to dehydrate it for tea. But it's worth it because this is my favorite flavor. In the past, I've also grown, of course, peppermint, orange mint, and strawberry mint. I wasn't much of a fan of the orange mint. Strawberry was all right, but it was very slow growing and dwarf-like. Spearmint is my favorite. Now, I have a mound of dirt here. It's just left over from when I did my house construction. I'm saving it for raised beds and other uses, but what I like to do is actually plant some zucchini on top of this mound of dirt. So you can see I've got some here. I've got some zucchini off to the side. It really likes growing up on a hill like this. And then I feel like I'm using this precious real estate still, right? Because God forbid we can't have any empty spots in our garden. That real estate is very precious. I've got a zucchini up here, and a couple down here, and here. So yes, you might think, oh my gosh, girl, what are you going to do with all that zucchini? Well, keep in mind that I also do seed saving for the zucchini. So you want to leave some that you let get mature for seed saving. And when you do that, the production is going to be decreased by not continuously picking them. I've been selecting for this Black Beauty zucchini for, oh gosh, at least 15 years. More like 16 probably. So this variety has been very selected for my climate and my soil type. Hence it performs very well for me. And I just love zucchini. Honestly, I like my zucchini more than my apple trees, and I have an apple orchard out here. I just find zucchini to be so versatile. And then around this corner here, I grew a few more of the Empress beans, the Empress bush bean. So just a really nice green bean. It also freezes and cans well. Usually I prefer eating it fresh and just steaming it in my Instant Pot. I'm saving the best for last. This section here is my pride and joy. It's my section of 300 breeding tomato plants. This is definitely my number one passion here. So today I want to talk about what am I assessing this early in the season. For any plant breeding projects, we're always evaluating and assessing the plants. But you might wonder, what on earth can I be assessing for this early when there's no fruit yet? So let's talk about that in detail. So what I'm mainly assessing for is plant vigor. And by plant vigor, I mean that generally speaking, the plant is healthy and robust, but more specifically, the germination, the root system, and the resilience of the plant. We also need to consider environmental versus genetic factors that can influence this, and we need to parse them out. So for example, I start my seedlings in the house, and they're in the house for about 15 days before they go out to the greenhouse. So right off the bat, when I am sowing these seeds in the trays, how fast are they germinating? Now, environmentally, this can be affected by the type of tray that I'm using. I used 2 different trays this year, the Bootstrap Farmer Air Prune tray and some plug trays. Definitely the Bootstrap Farmer air pruning trays are superior. So next year I will solely use those trays for everything. I'm pretty much done with my plug trays, but I did do a little bit of both this year. I'm going to show you an example of that. So a plug tray is this black one here. And this is a 72 cell plug tray. The bottom has a small hole for the water to drain out. Versus the Bootstrap Farmer, this is also 72 cell, but the hole on the bottom is very large. So it will air prune the roots. I have a whole video comparing these two in detail, so I'll put a link for that so you can actually see that in detail. The point I'm trying to make here is that the root system is going to be much healthier with the air prune tray. So to be fair, they should all be started in the air pruning trays. So right off the bat, I'm looking at speed of germination. Were all of the seedlings planted on the same day? Were they in the same growing conditions? Yes, they were started in my house under the same grow lights. Getting into the greenhouse, we're looking at the root structure. When I'm popping them out of the trays, we're looking at the root structure already as I'm potting them up. Another thing is plant resilience. By resilience, how fast can they rebound from stressors? A really big stressor for me out here is hardening off and transplanting them. I'm going to be doing an entire video on how I harden off my plants from the greenhouse. I'm a little unconventional in the way that I do it. But how quickly can they rebound from that hardening off? Other stressors could include flooding, heavy rainfall, or drought. So that's what I mean by resilience. Next, let's get into some actual details and look at individual plants up close, what I'm selecting for. Actually, right next to me here, I've got a pretty robust and healthy plant here. So this has pretty good plant vigor in the fact that these stems are really robust. I'm not a big fan of the wispy plants, the wispy foliage. I know that a lot of your paste and elongated tomatoes will have that. I personally really like these thick, robust stems, mainly because my growing site out here is so windy. It takes a lot to survive out here. So this one is project number 17F3. It's a chocolate bell. So I'm quite happy already noting the thick, robust stems on that one. Some other examples in the past that I've grown that I've used for breeding projects that I can think of off the top of my head, the Boxcar Willie and a variety Tlackalula Yellow. Those are exceptionally robust stems as well, hence that is why I have used them for breeding in the past. This variety is called Minnesota Icicle. This one has anthocyanin coloring. So not only does the fruit have that anthocyanin coloring, but the stem does as well. If you're a healthcare worker, you could say that this stem is cyanotic, meaning it's turning blue. It's blue in color. Very attractive. So this is just a specific trait that I bred for in this cultivar. These two plants here are both F2s, and they are fuzzy foliage. So this is a specific trait that I am selecting for. If you zoom in closely on the leaf here, you can see that the foliage is fuzzy. I'll also insert a picture of what it looked like in the greenhouse when it was quite young. So obviously this is a trait that I can see right away on the foliage and select for early. Next, we're going to go to its sibling, which is also an F2. And remember, F2s segregate a lot. So the sibling is non-fuzzy. On the other hand, I thought interesting with its sibling is it had a lot more plant vigor compared to the fuzzy one. This here is the F2 sibling to the fuzzy one. Obviously, you can see that it does not have the fuzzy foliage like its sibling. And if I wanted to be strict when I was selecting in the greenhouse, I could have just said, let's just cull this one. I only want the fuzzy ones. But I did choose to grow out a few of the non-fuzzy ones, and I'm glad I did. The reason is, this one I noted had exceptional plant vigor. It grew taller and faster than several of the other tomatoes. It is worth your time, in my opinion, to grow out several of the F2s where we get high segregation. in this case, we may be pleasantly surprised. Another thing I'm looking at is early fruit set. So this one is project number 35, yellow solid. I can't remember if it's F4 or F5 now, I have to look it up, but you can see that this has early fruit set. Most of my tomatoes do not have fruit on them yet, and this one does. So I expect that out of this variety because I've been growing this one for a few years now. Also keep in mind that early fruit set does not equal early maturing fruit. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to be an early variety, it's just that the fruit is setting early. This one, however, I already know it ripens and matures early too. And in my very short growing season in Minnesota, I can definitely appreciate early fruit maturity. This next one, I'm just looking more specifically at the foliage here. This is an F2 red striped pear. So I really like this kind of foliage. It's just the leaves are larger. It's still considered a regular leaf. It's not a potato leaf. It does have the serrated edges, but you just notice it's larger. And I would almost call this rugose, but it's not really wrinkly enough to probably call it the rugose foliage. But look at that foliage compared to, say, the neighbor here. This variety is early Sabacus aliana, and that foliage is a little more slender and pointier versus this one here. So I have a few varieties that do have this type of foliage, and I really like it. I think the reason I like it so much is it's so thick and robust and hardy, and it seems to correspond with the thicker, more robust stems. And it just performs well in my region here, so I really like this. I just want to show you that what's typical of the elongated type tomatoes is this wispy foliage. This can be deceiving because you might think that it's thirsty. Oh my gosh, I need to water it. It looks sick. No, this is normal for an elongated type of tomato. This one here is actually the Mila tomato, and I'm selecting for a larger form of that. So hopefully within a few years I'll have this in a larger size of the Mila tomato. But this plant is perfectly healthy. It looks like it needs a drink of water, but this elongated wispiness, I would say, is very typical for this type of tomato and is totally normal. Here's another example of that foliage, almost rugose type of foliage that I was talking about here. Again, this is definitely something that I personally want to select for. This one is a F2 bronze bell. And I've noticed this year that a lot of these F2 bronze bells are showing really good traits like this. So I'm quite intrigued. I'm very anxious to see what the fruit is like. But up to this point, this one is very intriguing to me and I'm very excited about it. I'm probably stating the obvious here, but when it comes to breeding, you want to use the healthiest, best plants. So if you have a tomato plant that is diseased and dying, you would never use that for either plant breeding or seed saving for that matter. It's a rare moment, but we managed to take an hour-and-a-half break to go kayaking. I'm not one to sit still, but kayaking can really de-stress me. If you've never been to Minnesota lakes, you're missing out. The sheer beauty here is just spectacular. A bit cool this night with nice calm waters. Thanks for hanging out with me for my early season garden tour. I'm in my hayfield right now, and as you can see, it desperately needs to be cut. I'm just waiting for a stretch of rain-free days to get that job done. We do square bales of hay here for our sheep on the farm.